Can he pull off a major political upset in Kansas? This week, meet the man on a quest to unseat veteran area Senator Pat Roberts. Plus, debating the pros and cons of the Missouri transportation tax. Hello, I'm Nick Haynes. Thanks for joining us. We are in election mode this week. In just a moment, we'll be joined by proponents and opponents of the transportation tax you'll be asked to vote on in a little more than 2 weeks if you live in Missouri. But first, we had set aside this entire show for a debate between United States Senator Pat Roberts and his Tea Party-backed challenger, Dr. Milton Wolff. Yet despite approaching the senator months ago, the Roberts campaign said that given the senator's schedule and commitments, both in Kansas and in the U.S. Senate, he would be unable to participate. In fact, Roberts is not participating in any debates. Should that campaign tactic deprive his opponent of the limelight? Here at KCPT, we don't think that's fair. So here he is, Leawood radiologist and Republican candidate for U.S. Senate in Kansas, Dr. Milton Wolff. Thank you so much for being with us. You mean to tell me that since you announced your candidacy in October, you have not appeared on stage or shared a forum at all with Pat Roberts?
We've crossed paths a few times on the campaign. He's done everything he can, I think, to avoid me. I sure wish he would debate. You know, I think Kansans deserve to hear from anyone who would represent them or hope to represent them. But he doesn't want to answer the difficult questions, and I think that's unfortunate for voters.
You've had a successful medical practice. Why did you get into this race in the first place, Dr. Wolff?
See, now that's a great question. This is the last thing I need. I do have a successful medical practice. Carrie and I are in a great time in our lives. We're actually empty nesters, and if there's ever a great time in your life, it's being an empty nester. But our country's in trouble, Nick. You know, you don't have to look too hard to realize that our country's in serious trouble. And those in Washington, those career politicians in both parties, frankly, they've betrayed us. They've been betraying the American value. They've been betraying the Constitution. I think we all have to step up and do what we can. And I realize that I must do this, that we all must step up if we're going to save our republic.
Some people think that this is a bit of a one-note campaign, though. Roberts has been in Washington too long, and whether he even lives here in Kansas is questionable.
Pat Roberts moved to Washington 47 years ago. Here in Kansas, he rents a La-Z-Boy recliner at a donor's house on a golf course. Roberts only visits
every time I get an opponent.
Pat Roberts, the senior senator from Kansas, having some trouble because he spends all of his time, essentially lives in Washington, stays on a friend's couch back home.
Nobody should spend 47 years in Washington.
So how do you come up with these 40-plus years in Washington? We tallied up his time in the House and the Senate, and that comes up with 34 years.
Well, and before that, for I believe it was 13 years, he was a staffer in Congress. So he's been receiving his paycheck from Congress for 47 years. He moved to Washington in 1967. It's 47 years he's been in Washington. I think that's too long.
But some people will say, hey, that's great, that's experience. That means that Kansas gets more clout in Washington.
Well, what has that experience gotten us? A $17.5 trillion debt that's the anchor on our economy. It's the threat of our children's future. Look what else it's gotten us. It's gotten us someone who goes along to get along in Washington. You know, Pat Roberts is not a bad man. I've never said a single disparaging word about him. In fact, I'm disgusted by these personal attack politics. I wish we could discuss issues that matter. But look at these issues. Senator Roberts voted for Barack Obama's $600 billion tax increase that affected 80% of Kansans. He's voted to raise our debt ceiling 11 times. He's voted to put Kathleen Sebelius in charge of Obamacare. At some point, that 47 years turns into go along to get along, and Kansans are suffering.
You know, I was looking at some of the record, though, of Pat Roberts. When you look at some of these major issues, immigration, tough Chris Kobach, Kansas Secretary of State. You know, people wouldn't think that there's anybody more tough on immigration. He's supporting Pat Roberts. Pat Roberts says he has a 100% rating with the National Right to Life. He touts his A rating with the NRA. So I see some of the comments about you is they don't think that you have an actual issues. Your issues are any different than that of Pat Roberts.
Is it surprising to you that politicians circle their wagons around other politicians? Isn't that the way of Washington? But, you know, look, I've been running a campaign based purely on issues. I think it is an issue whether or not a senator actually lives in our state. The Constitution demands it, Article 1, Section 3. But, you know, here's the difference between me and politicians. You know, I think we need to find positive solutions to our problems, not just complain about them. I oppose Obamacare. I actually wrote a plan to replace Obamacare called Patient Care. People can find that on my website, which is miltonwolff.com. The Objective Standard reviewed my plan and others. They said that mine was by far the best alternative to Obamacare. I'd love to have Pat Roberts on and discuss health care. His plan for health care is to put Kathleen Sebelius in charge of it.
But he was one of the first senators to ask for Kathleen Sebelius to resign as health secretary.
He sure did, 3 days after I announced my candidacy. And as the Kansas City Star reported, if you think those two facts are unrelated, then you probably think the KU Jayhawks are going to win the national championship this year in football. You know, but that's what politicians do. Pat Roberts has changed his position on one thing after another as soon as I came along, calls himself conservative. But before I came along, his rating among these conservative groups like Club for Growth, 55, FreedomWorks, 54. Now, that's not conservative. What he's doing is an election year conversion to try to get elected one more time. But after 47 years in Washington, it's time.
Some people might say, well, okay, this is somebody who's been there perhaps too long, or they may have concerns about his residency requirements, but are you the person that should be in that seat in Washington? And your opponent has brought up issues of your character. That includes those issues of you posting those patient x-rays to Facebook, those photographs, and those were put on the Facebook page, and he's put those in ads.
Stunning news reports show that Wolf exposed private patient x-rays and other personal information on Facebook, where Wolf relentlessly poked fun at the dead or wounded. A Kansas City medical ethics expert called Wolf's behavior beyond alarming for a professional in the field of medicine.
Now, I know you've apologized for that, but isn't it fair for people to say, are you the person we want now representing us in Washington?
Well, let me tell you the difference between politicians and myself, yet another. When I make a mistake, I'll admit it. I'll apologize for it. In fact, I'll own my mistakes, and I'll try to learn from them. I think that's part of life. And now let me correct you also in something that you said, because Pat Roberts has been frankly dishonest about this. Yes. I didn't release any private patient information. I didn't release any photographs. What we're talking about is anonymous x-rays. There really is a big difference. This was years ago, and actually removed years ago. And I said at the time, look, if you've never said anything you're sorry about and wish you could take back, you may not understand how I feel. But years ago, I decided to take these down long before I ever thought I'd ever be running for office. And now Pat Roberts uses these as personal, vicious attack ads. He can't discuss the issues, so he comes after me personally. Frankly, I think this is part of what's wrong with Washington. He's avoiding debating issues and policy matters that matter to Kansans, and instead he wants to make this a personal attack. Well, you know, I'm not scared of his attacks. I won't back down. America is in trouble. Kansans are suffering. And we need to finally find someone who will offer positive solutions like what I'm doing. My patient care plan for health care. I'd like to talk about the fair tax to replace our corrupt IRS and our tax code. I'd like to talk about sealing our border and finally getting that under control. We're suffering not just an immigration problem now, but an invasion problem right now. There are positive solutions we can offer to these problems, but politicians just want to talk about personal attacks.
Why is it, though, that Chris Kobach, though, again, is supporting Pat Roberts?
Well, you'd certainly have to ask Chris Kobach. You know, I don't understand why politicians all feel the need to run in a herd. Okay. But what we find is that they turn into these go-along to get-along Republicans, and they go along with the Democrats. And so when Barack Obama needs Pat Roberts to vote for his debt ceiling increase, Pat Roberts does. When Barack Obama needs Pat Roberts to vote for his $600 billion fiscal cliff tax hike, Pat Roberts does. What I think we need citizen legislators who offer positive solutions. I think we need term limits. I've limited myself, and I'll try to have term limits on that entire Congress. And so they'll come home and live under the same laws that they forced on anyone else.
What is the biggest lesson you've learned on this campaign trail since you declared your candidacy 10 months ago?
I'll tell you, this campaign has been both humbling and heartening in so many ways. But the biggest thing of all, the good far outweighs the bad. There are so many great Kansans out there. They care about these specific issues, these policies that matter, and they're willing to get involved. They come to us. We've got an army of volunteers. We call them the Wolf Pack. They're out knocking on doors for us today. We've got people who are contributing, people who are getting involved in one way or another because they know our country's in trouble and we're trying to save it.
You were also the cousin of President Obama. Are you not mentioning that much anymore?
Can you believe that?
What have you got in common with the president?
Well, no, I actually mention that everywhere I go.
Okay.
I say, you know, I do want to confess it's true. Barack Obama and I are actually cousins. It's just that you cannot choose your family. I think Barack Obama is the worst president in our lifetime and actually the worst president in our history. And I think we need to find Republicans brave enough to stand up and fight him. You know, I've actually stood toe-to-toe with him. I've looked him in the eye. And I've told him he's wrong, because he is. And his policies are damaging America. It's nothing personal, but his policies are destroying America. And I knew when I did that, by the way, I'd be targeted. And I've been harassed. My family's been harassed. They've sent the IRS after us to harass us. And at the end of the day, the IRS paid an interest penalty to us instead of the other way around. And then they sent the IRS after my business to audit us. And then the White House even tried to get me fired. But you know, all that served to do was fire me up. Because Barack Obama and a servant government should never treat a sovereign citizen that way. We need to find people in that Senate and in that Congress who will stand up and fight Barack Obama and anyone who would abuse their power the way he does.
Up next, debating the merits of the Missouri transportation tax. Next on Week in Review. Critics call it the biggest tax increase in Missouri history. Proponents call Amendment 7 on the August 5th ballot a crucial vote to improve highways, bridges and transit in the state. The 3/4-cent sales tax increase would bring in more than $5 billion over 10 years and add about 8 cents to a $10 purchase. It would largely fund the rebuilding of I-70 from Kansas City to St. Louis, including adding an extra lane in each direction. In our area, there's a pot of money for a new Broadway bridge and a $124 million to expand the Kansas City streetcar project. It's a great deal, says former Missouri state lawmaker Jewel Patrick, now a consultant for Missourians for safe transportation and new jobs. The official campaign to convince voters to say yes. Also with the Yes campaign, Bridget Williams, deputy director of the Heavy Constructors Association of Greater Kansas City. Encouraging you to vote no, Missourians for Better Transportation Solutions, an alliance of 40 individuals and groups, including the disability advocacy group The Whole Person, where Sheila Styron serves as policy director, and the League of Women Voters of Kansas City, where Linda Vogel-Smith is the chamber president. Jewel, you were a Republican in the Missouri legislature, which was not very keen on increasing taxes of any sort, and now you're backing what is the largest tax increase in Missouri history. That sounds odd.
Well, for Missourians, core function of state government is taking care of roads and bridges, and we've done a poor job at that in the last few years. Missourians across the state, whether Republican and Democrat, want to see our roads and bridges fixed. Amendment 7 will get that done.
So what's not to like about this, Sheila?
I think there are a lot of things not to like about it. First of all, it is the largest tax that Missourians have ever had to pay, and it comes at a time when Missourians can least afford it. And we really don't need more roads and bridges. We have the funding to fix the roads and bridges. Missouri has more freeway miles per capita in St. Louis and Kansas City than other cities in the country. Congestion rates are as low as they were in the early 80s. We don't need all of this for roads. 90% of this tax is going to the roads, and a very small percentage is going to transit.
But Linda, you know, people who travel on I-70 will see huge amounts of potholes. It's not a great highway, and a lot of people take their life in their own hands when they go on I-70 in Kansas City?
You know, it's really unfortunate that the government in Missouri has not seen fit over the years to maintain that road as they should. And they really need to, frankly, suck up and look at what needs to be done, how much money you have to run a government and governmental functions properly, and budget for that within the state budget, and doing it in a way that is fair. And what is proposed is just plain not fair.
Why isn't it fair, though? It's only, as I pointed out at the beginning, it's only about 8 cents more per $10 purchase. That's not a lot, is it?
You know, but what this does is it levies a tax on people that they pay every time, every day of the week, for things that they need for their daily lives. And I see that Joel has out here some eggs and bread, which would not be taxed at the grocery store, but there are a lot of things at the grocery store that you buy, all your laundry products that are going to be taxed. Anytime you go to a restaurant, it's going to be taxed. And we already have a very substantial sales tax burden. And what they've done with this proposal is they've exempted the truckers. And indeed, the proposal, in effect, would says that they cannot have a toll road, which would be one legitimate way of providing money. And not only that, that they can't raise taxes on gasoline. And these are the ones who would use it.
Okay, so why did we come up with this sales tax then, Bridget? Why couldn't we have looked at other solutions? Why not an increase in the gas tax, for instance?
Well, honestly, we did. And what the Missouri voters told us is the only thing they were willing to consider is a sales tax.
Even though the gas tax in Missouri is one of the lowest in the nation?
Even no one wants to talk about a gas tax. And when you talk about the impact that you would have to put on a consumer for a gas tax, you're talking maybe 28 cents, 25, 28 cents per trip. And it just, Missourians do not want to talk about a gas tax. Toll roads, when that discussion came up for issue, it was a non-starter for Missouri voters.
Seriously, but in Kansas, they have the Turnpike Authority. A lot of I-70 in the state of Kansas is paid for by a toll, and so the users are paying for that. That wouldn't work in the state of Missouri, Jewel?
Well, Missourians have actually rejected it. It's gone to the legislature year after year. It's gone nowhere, and I think it's because Missouri has a history of having good roads in Missouri and driving to other states where they have to pay sort of twice, both at the pump and at the toll, and Missourians have flatly rejected that historically. So if Missourians would want to do a toll, there is one place in the state where you could do a toll, and that's I-70. We don't have the congestion anywhere else. And if you put a toll on I-70, hypothetically, the cost of going across our state would be approximately $50. I think if Missourians knew that the advocates of the opponents of this want to put a toll on I-70, which they're already paying part of with their gas tax, an additional $50 to go across the state, I think they'd be incensed in that idea. And so, we're agnostic as to what solution Missourians want. We believe this is the solution Missourians want and will accept, and that's why we're supporting it.
Sheila, you mentioned about the roads in all of this, but this also proposes a lot of other items that include transit. $124 million to expand the streetcar line. There's also millions of dollars that will help provide a max bus service along Prospect Avenue. I would have thought the whole person would be supportive of that.
Well, the whole person, people with disabilities, the elderly, people who are transit dependent, we all need any transportation we can get, and it's kind of hard to sit at a table and turn down a potato chip when it's right in front of your face. But when you look at the big picture, it's really not very much money for transit. And that $124 came at a pretty steep price. A lot of us who attended meetings for planning the project lists, we saw those numbers change. We started out with a much lower number. It went up, as it went up higher and higher for the streetcar, we saw that other transit projects were thrown off the list. Some bus things, some bike and ped things, $11 million for the regional mobility paratransit services that are the only way that people who are disabled and can't take buses and can't walk can get around. So it's a pretty steep price to pay. Missouri really needs to go back to the drawing board. The legislature.
So you would prefer to have nothing rather than this?
No, I would prefer that we go back to the drawing board and make a plan that will be much better for Missouri. This isn't thought out. We're going to be stuck with this for 10 years should Amendment 7 pass. We won't be able to make any changes for 10 years, and many of us can see flaws before we've even gotten started.
Okay, Jewel.
Yes, well, I just want to slightly disagree. Missouri Public Transit Association, which represents all the providers in the state who actually service the disabled and the seniors, are actually supporting this measure. They're supporting this measure because it's the only viable option to increase ridership, to get better service to both the senior and disabled community around the state. And they're not doing that because they're bought off or paid for. They're doing it because they know how critical these services are, and it's the only solution that Missourians will accept.
Linda.
I hear from many people that one of the problems they have with transit in Kansas City is going east-west, not just north-south. And those issues do not seem to be adequately addressed. And as Sheila has said, there seem to be a lot of sacrifices in order to direct money to something that seems very enticing, the expanded streetcar line. But we have to keep in mind that the expanded area is only something like 8 miles. And you have to be able to feed that streetcar line in order to have it carry the passengers and to be effective. It would seem to me that there needs to be much more public conversation. It's not clear to me that, I'm not sure where Joel's numbers are coming from about $50 to cross the state. You could cross Kansas for a lot less than $50 on using their toll road, and Oklahoma has a toll road. And we're not talking about numbers of that magnitude.
Yeah. So how do they do it so much cheaper in other places then, Joel?
Because they subsidize the toll, so the system isn't paid for by the toll. They use gas tax, and in Kansas they use sales tax. In fact, their legislature just passed a 1-cent sales tax there. So that toll is just a portion of the cost of driving. So,
yes,
and their legislature created those tolls. In Missouri, you have to take it to the vote of the people. So in Missouri, if there's any revenue increase or a toll that's placed on a road, ultimately the voters get to decide. So we can't just wave a magic wand and solve problems like other states might be able to. We have to have this discussion about what the right solution is, and we believe this is one Missourians will accept.
What happens if voters say no on August 5th, Bridget?
If voters say no on August 6th, we are back to the drawing board and not able to go back to the ballot until 2018, I believe, which, MoDOT is at risk of losing the matching funds for federal dollars, which means those dollars could get allocated to other places of the country. It will be a maintenance-only program where, you think your potholes are bad now. What happens after another bad winter? The expansion of I-70 absolutely will not occur. The bottleneck of the Broadway Bridge will get worse. The jobs, this is expected to create a significant amount of jobs, about 75,000 jobs, construction jobs, just in the metropolitan area. Those are good paying, with benefits. Those are good paying jobs. So Kansas City has a lot at stake as we talk about this issue.
So when voters size this up, Sheila, where you might not like the way this has been put together, that's a lot to sacrifice, isn't it?
Well, I think we have a lot to lose if we do pass Amendment 7. We'll go from having the 14th highest sales tax to the 7th. We'll be ahead of California and New York and Illinois. And really, there won't be that many jobs. There's absolutely no evidence that some highway jobs will make the whole state's economy do better. As a matter of fact, people will buy less because of the burden that this sales tax will put on their pocketbooks, and they'll shop online, and the ones who live close to Kansas may do more shopping over there. I don't think this is a good deal for people in Missouri or people in Kansas City region, and it isn't a good way to. It's a Band-Aid for Missouri's future transportation needs.
It is it's a proven fact that a sound infrastructure generates further economic development. Where your infrastructure is sound, companies, businesses are more willing to expand and broaden their base. Tell the construction worker that is right now working himself out of a job because it's about to complete that this creation of jobs is not good. This is a good thing for the working people. As we recover from the economy, we cannot afford to not invest in our infrastructure.
Linda.
Well, this is going to place a considerable burden on the very people that you're concerned about. The average income in Jackson County is somewhere around $47,000 a year. And this level of tax increase on a standard market basket of taxable goods would cost about $90 a year to that person or family. And I look at it this way, you know, hey, that's 30 pounds of hamburger. You want to take that out of the family budget? You've got some very serious things to think about in how this is applied.
Okay, but Jewel, because you have the bread here and the milk and the eggs, so these are not items that would be taxed.
That's correct. Let's be clear about what's not taxed under Amendment 7. Prescription drugs, groceries, rent, utilities, your necessities of life, health care, are all exempt from Amendment 7. So that's what it doesn't do. But let's compare it to what the opponents are saying we should do. If you raise the gas tax 18 cents, which is at least the amount you'd have to raise it, you're going to burden those low-income families far more than a 3/4 cent sales tax.
Okay, the proponents and opponents of Amendment 7, the transportation tax, on your statewide Missouri ballot a little less than 2 weeks from now on August 5th. Thank you all. Next week, we head over to the Kansas side as we ask who should lead Johnson County. Ed Eilert has been the man in charge. Does he deserve another 4-year term? He'll be here along with his 2 challengers next Friday on Week in Review. I'm Nick Haynes from all of us here at KCPT. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.